mean, I'm afraid I'm afraid. I've watched your other interviews, and I love them, by the way. And by the way, shout out to Atheist Edge, Jim. One of my favorite interviews. I couldn't have even seen any flaws in that interview. It was so good, so entertaining, both of you.
Right. So number one, Jim is awesome. I was just talking
awesome
to him a little bit earlier today, by the way, over Messenger. So he's a great guy. I love that guy.
Hi, welcome to Atheist Edge. I'm Courtney here with... Hi, I'm Susan Turpin. Yeah, we're really excited to have her. And we're going to kind of get into why you're here, but I just kind of wanted to start with your history with religion, because you don't have too big of a story there, right?
No, not really. My deconversion story is pretty boring. I went to church a lot when I was very, very young, but we stopped going when I was about 8 years old, and because my mother actually became an atheist, and my sister and I kept going, and then after my dad died, I sort of was like, religion, yay, as a coping mechanism, and I just sort of strayed away from it as the years went on, and back in about 2012, I found a group of atheists down in Corpus Christi that was really, really great. They've got a really strong atheist group down there, and they became some great friends. They did a lot of activism, you know, like feminist issues and, you know, church and state issues and stuff like that, and they're really what got me into all of the stuff that I love to do. So,
yeah. So I guess, like, people tend to, some people tend to be a little critical of atheist groups as kind of being pointless, and I'm hearing that you'd probably disagree with that.
No, yeah, I think what a lot of atheists find whenever they leave religion is that they don't have that sense of community anymore. So I'm a big proponent of groups of like-minded people finding each other and being able to connect and being able to find common ground, you know, even if it's just among one particular thing, like, you know, the lack of religion, and it helps you find people to connect with. So
So you, I guess your most close group is the Secular Caucus?
Yes. So the Secular
what
Caucus.
That is first of
all. Yes. So the Democratic Secular Caucus is a group that came out of actually originally the 2014 State Democratic Convention, or 14, I believe. Yeah. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. And they originally only had a group of maybe about 10 to 15 people come to this Secular Caucus. And when they had it at the state convention this year, it was a room full of people. The state Democratic Convention was in Fort Worth this year, and it was a room full of people. It was probably about 300 people. It was a really, really good number, and we actually had some viable candidates that came and they spoke, and, you know, they gave their support of secular issues, and it was really, really great to hear that.
That's exciting.
From actual candidates. Yeah, it made me really happy.
Yeah.
So we held elections for the caucus officers, and I am the treasurer, so which is fitting because I work accounting and I'm an accounting student, so it works out well.
Yeah.
And we've had a number of meetings. We're gonna really start stuff once the legislature goes into session. We're going to focus on getting in touch with, you know, secular, you know, obviously right now, you know, they're just candidates, and we're hoping that they actually win their elections. You know, the secular legislators, and wanting to focus on getting the secular agenda, I guess, which sounds like, you know, it sounds a little silly.
Yeah,
but
I wanted to kind of ask, like, what that would look like, per se.
I think a lot of it is working closely, because we were working closely with the Secular Coalition for America, and I think a lot of it is going to have to do with, because we're still sort of in our infancy stages right now, and we're going to do a lot with making sure that, you know, separation of church and state issues, and wanting to promote and support the candidates that, even if they don't openly say I'm an atheist, then, you know, the ones that are pro separation of church and state,
right,
that we're, you know, putting our support behind them and trying to, you know, get legislation through that will support, you know, science-based and fact-based curriculums, and making sure that
We're fact-based. Science in a science class? What?
Yeah, who would have thunk, right? And that's, you know, we've got some really, really great officers. We're actually all over the state. The chair is in Austin, and we have another woman that is in Denton who's actually the most closely involved with a lot of the political processes, because we have to register as a PAC and we had to declare a treasurer, so we're getting all of our paperwork done and stuff. And I highly suggest people become members, because we will be looking for members eventually, but if we feel interested in that, it's definitely something to get involved with.
So separate church and state, education. Do you guys kind of deal with reproductive rights as well?
I believe that's going to have at least something to do with it, because that's something that's very, very near and dear to my heart.
Yes.
I actually worked for Planned Parenthood for almost a year now. I started working there back in December, just in accounting, but it's still really great to feel like you're part of something bigger, and I absolutely love my job.
I'm completely jealous of you for that.
It's wonderful. I really, really love it. And I've raised money for the National Network of Abortion Funds since 2012, every single year, for Lilith Fund, which is an Austin-based abortion fund, and for Texas Equal Access Fund, which is North Texas. And they're absolutely wonderful. So the reproductive justice stuff is very, very near and dear to my heart, because it's something that is it affects everybody.
Yes.
Like, it's not just an issue for somebody with a uterus, you know, it's an issue for every single person to make these decisions for themselves, regardless of how they identify.
Yeah.
And it's very, very near and dear to my heart. So I really love the reproductive justice stuff.
Yeah. So Planned Parenthood got a lot of pushback, I guess, with this kind of new wave of like anti-abortion resurgence.
Yeah.
I know it's an old argument, but I guess there's this sort of very demonized image of what Planned Parenthood is and what it's about and what it argues for, and so I wonder if you might speak to what they're actually arguing for and what they're actually about.
The big mission with Planned Parenthood is healthcare for all mission. And I mean, abortion services are only approximately 3% of what Planned Parenthood does. So it's, and even then it's, you know,
Say it again?
privately funded. It's only about 3% of what they do.
Abortion is only 3% of what they do.
Okay. They do education, they do community outreach, they do, you know, the actual healthcare portion of everything. And we've got such a really, really great crew of educators and outreach specialists that it baffles me that people can say that what we're doing is not something that's needed, that's you know, that's not necessary. And the idea that people are so adamant about, well, we need to take away funding from Planned Parenthood, and it's just like, no, please don't, because you are just shooting people in the foot. Like, it's just doing it to spite anybody who has any sort of compassion. And I grew up in a very, very liberal household. My dad was described as a yellow dog Democrat. You know, my mom, like I had said earlier, she became an atheist when I was like 8 years old. She's got a great deconversion story too. My grandmother was basically like an older lady sort of mentor for young Democrat women, and my aunt actually works with Ann Richards' two sons at their law firm. So it's like, my whole entire family is incredibly liberal, and they're absolutely wonderful. So I've only known showing compassion towards people. I've never, even when I was, you know, deep into religion, I still could not get past the idea of, why would you not want to help people? Why do you not want to do that? And I think that's sort of always bubbled under the surface. So when I left religion, it was very much like activism. That's what I need to do, is activism.
Yeah.
And I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that a lot of people don't really think to do. They kind of assume that somebody else will take care of that issue, and it can be very empowering to feel like you are doing something that actually makes a difference in that front.
Right, yeah. And I think it's intimidating to a lot of people.
Yes.
I think that's what a lot of people, it deters them from actually getting out there and making their opinions known and wanting their voice to be heard. And that makes me a little frustrated, because it's like you're saying, everybody figures that somebody else is going to do it. But if everybody figures that, then nobody's going to end up doing it.
Yeah, and there's also a fear that the efforts are going to be smaller than the larger machine, and that they won't actually make a major difference.
Right, like that there's no point. But you know, people use the term snowflake as this derogatory term, and I've heard the, you know, the saying that you get enough snowflakes together and you have a blizzard. And it's a good way of thinking about it, because you have to be able to band together and find your common ground. And I'm a big believer in intersectionality among movements, and finding your allies and building them up and being there for other people whenever they need it, and then them doing the same for you.
Right.
So
yeah. So speaking of kind of being part of that change, you and I also did the sex education presentation.
yes.
So maybe we can kind of speak to that. And that was with Nathaniel.
Yes, Nathaniel. He is one of the assistant state directors for American Atheists, which I actually also became an assistant state director for American Atheists relatively recently. So I'm representing Fort Worth. He's representing Dallas.
Okay.
And American Atheists has put together a really, really great curriculum for supporting the fact-based and science-based sex ed. And it's a great presentation about how you can get in touch with your local legislators and your school board and anybody who's going to make a difference in terms of what the actual curriculum is. And he tells, the presentation tells you about what they're actually teaching this kid, and it's terrifying what they're teaching these children.
Yeah, my section was on the what actually is being taught right now, and it was fun. It was fun to get through. It was really terrible, and I kept having people stop the presentation because we kind of wanted it to be sort of a discussion, and so we were allowing like comments and questions during the presentation, but it ended up being a little bit of a distraction because there was such an upsetting large amount of content of the anti-LGBT message and slut shaming and female shaming in general, and it was just terrifying.
It really, really is. And I had a friend of mine who, she has 2 children in the public school system in Gregory, Portland, so down near Corpus Christi. And they had, I guess, sort of a parent presentation for what they were going to show the children in this actual section of what they were wanting to do for this, extended amount of time.
Right.
She took pictures and she took notes and she sent them. She posted on Facebook and she sent them to me, and she's like, she couldn't wrap her brain around the ideas that they were presenting and the statements that they were wanting to make, and it's so infuriating because it's such a blatant disregard of any sort of civility, any sort of facts.
Yeah.
And
it actively goes against factual information, and in a lot of states they're legally allowed to give not only misleading information but completely false information as propaganda. And it, statistically it doesn't change the outcome. It actually makes the outcomes worse of teen pregnancy and STDs because of this disregard for the value of education and teaching kids what they need to know.
Exactly. Yeah.
one section that I had really loved, and I don't think he actually showed the video during the presentation, but
I think it didn't work.
Yeah, that one didn't work. So there's a section.
This was a good one.
This was really. So there's a section where it's a video of, I don't know if he's a teacher or if he's a coach. I'm not entirely sure what he was.
He was a coach, but he wasn't legally allowed to display to have condoms in the room, or to actually make a display of the condoms.
Yeah.
And like how to use them.
And he turns it into this giant metaphor of, if you want to partake in shoe activities, you have to use a sock and protect yourself.
Yes.
So you put the sock, and he's like showing how you put it on,
Yeah.
and you roll it on.
Yep. You leave room for your toes and like roll it down. It was awesome. And it's so blatantly, you know what it's about.
Exactly.
Just even if you don't know the circumstances around it, you understand what he's doing. And it is really tragic that that's the lengths that have to be gone to actually get real information that's needed for kids. Because the statistics of how well condoms work changes completely if they're used improperly and if they don't know what they're doing. Even if they get that message that condoms work, which a lot of these programs say that they don't, and they discourage you from even trying them. But even if you get that far of past that misinformation, you still aren't given the instructions on how to use them properly. And so that brings the statistics of STDs up as well.
Yeah, and it's excuse me, I'm sorry. It's infuriating and it's frustrating, and I remember when I was in 7th grade, we actually went through, and I don't think it was Abstinence Plus, I'm pretty sure it was just Abstinence Only program in Corpus Christi, and it was called Sex Can Wait.
Right.
And
That sounds familiar.
they did a lot of the scare tactics where they're showing, your, pictures of various genitals with various, STIs and things of that nature, and it's like, why are you showing these to 12-year-olds? Like, I mean, I understand the idea of wanting to present them information and options and stuff, but it wasn't used as an informational session. It was used as scare tactics.
Yeah.
And one thing I remember even years later was they made shirts for the program. And we had a dress code whenever I was in middle school, so we could only wear either solid color shirts or shirts supporting the school or a program in the school or something like that. And so every single 7th grade, like just any 7th grader really, because as you see everybody wearing them, had shirts that said "Sex Can Wait" across them. And it's like, this is not a good way to teach any of this. It's just not.
Well, and if it's taught as one option that's a viable and respectable option of abstinence, then that's part of comprehensive sex education. It's not completely ignored in an actual educational program, but getting the information outside of that option so that kids are ready. And it's not like there's a point where they have like classes when you're married or classes when you're they used to do that in like the 50s with like doctor's appointments and college courses of sex education for married couples only.
Yeah, do you have any questions about the wedding night sort of thing?
Right. But unfortunately, like, these concepts of proper contraceptive options don't go away with marriage, and they don't become less of a necessity. And then, of course, the other thing that is most important to me about this, apart from the education, is the discussions of consent and communication and respect, because those things are also never touched on in these programs.
No, it's not.
And that's really terrifying to me, because that is something that is it's just so detrimental to every person that becomes part of sexual activity.
Yeah, and it really messes with a kid's psyche to teach them sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad. Oh, now that you're married, sex is great and have all the kids that you can.
Right.
And that's what religion teaches to these kids. And I still have a lot of issues with communication stuff and a lot of stuff having to do with sex, because when I was in religion and going through the abstinence only sex education and being so involved in religion when I was mid-teens and stuff, in those really formative years, I still have a lot of issues talking about anything having to do with my own personal sexuality.
Right.
Like anything with somebody else, it's like I will talk about that all day with you, with facts and figures and stuff like that. I'm totally fine with that. But when it's my own personal stuff, it's still it's had that effect on me for so long, and it does that to so many kids, and it's so sad. Yeah, and it is really it's really sad. And there's also this idea of the kind of hetero only type of narrative, and so it demonizes and others people who step outside of that kind of one framework of sex within marriage and only heterosexual marriage. Yeah, the heteronormative stuff. Yeah, and it totally sets aside any deviation from that, which quite often is something that is completely healthy and fine and should be if you don't like it, then you don't have to. It's about accepting that there's diversity in people and what they like and what they don't, and it's completely fine, Yeah. And respecting people's boundaries and understanding, that people, if somebody says they're not okay with them, then they're just not okay with them. Yeah, and that comes back to the importance of consent and communication and teaching that as part of that education, because it is vitally important to healthy human life and to not hurting each other without realizing it. Yeah. It's the whole just the entire state of the sex ed curriculum and society's inability to actually deal with a lot of stuff having to do with sex in general is frustrating, because I get frustrated with myself, obviously, with my own personal stuff, but in general, it is incredibly frustrating. Yeah, it sneaks up on you, the indoctrination. Really does. Yeah, it does. So at the end of our presentation, we started with the bad stuff, and then at the end of the presentation, you came in with strategies of how we can make this better. And it really just kind of came down to making your voice heard in politics and voting, right? Yeah, voting, and which I did today, which I'm very, very happy about. I have my sticker at home. I didn't bring it. I literally just came from voting. I should have represented on my forehead or something. Yeah, I mean, it's about voting, and it's about, even if you don't have a child in that particular school district or in the school system in general, it's about making sure that you're keeping people in check and not wanting to overextend their reach and their power, because they're going, so many right-wing people are going to take so much power because people are allowing them to. Right. And you have to be able to... goes under the radar. Yeah, exactly. You've got to be able to step forward, and I realize that it's terrifying. I have been completely terrified of being the one to say something and being the one to make my opinion known and make my voice heard. And it's terrifying, but it gets easier the more that you do it. Yeah, it does. It does, yeah. And so there is a problem with public schools bringing in religious organizations to give this program, and it's almost like unsupervised, because there aren't a lot of laws requiring things to be factually accurate. So that was about going to the school boards, right? Yeah, so it was going to school board meetings and requesting the curriculum from the principals and health teachers of the various individual schools and stuff like that. So that's a big way that you can, even if you don't have children in the school system or in that particular school, you can make sure that you have a way to make your own voice heard.
Mm-hmm.
It is a lot more powerful to make sure that that the words come from a child, because they're the ones who are ultimately affected by it.
Yeah, those shirts.
Yeah.
What do the shirts say?
It's like, I deserve the facts or something
I deserve
like that.
the facts.
Yes, I love that.
It's like kids coming into, council meetings and things wearing that. It's amazing.
Yeah, that makes me really happy.
Yeah, because it's so true.
It really, yeah.
And it sends such a clear, powerful message. I deserve the facts. As,
Yeah.
You're looking at their face like you're denying me something that's vital to my health and well-being,
Yeah, you can't expect kids to be treated like kids their entire lives up until they turn 18, and then all of a sudden have all of these skills and abilities to make it on their own and know everything that they're supposed to do. You have to be able to treat the kids with respect. And it comes down to, a lot of these programs don't treat the children with respect. They just don't. They're talking down to them, it's condescending, it's like you were saying earlier, it's slut shaming, it's shaming to women, it's shaming to LGBTQ people. It's the whole thing, like I keep saying over and over. It's infuriating.
Yeah. So I think the final piece of that of counteracting this clear propaganda is, as parents, giving your own education to your kids and talking to them about it, because if your child is in a program like this, then you do have the power to change the trajectory that it puts them on, of being one of those statistics of, higher teen pregnancy and higher STDs, having like Girl Scout meetings about it, or, whatever, doing these things that are the kind of grassroots way of counteracting the negative effects of this, because it is very real and it is very scary.
Yeah. I think I think some parents, and I never want to make sweeping generalization about parents because I don't have kids myself, so I never want to say all parents do X. There are some parents that I think their own personal issues get reflected on their children in, any sort of insecurities and any biases and stuff like that gets pushed down to their children in things that they say and things that they do and things that they teach the children. And we've got to be able to just treat the kids like they're humans, man.
Yeah, like separate.
Yeah. It's like they're not an extension of you, they are their own beings.
Yeah. Neither of us have kids. Disclaimer. But it's,
I like kids. I do. I have respect for children.
Yeah. But at least from an outsider's look, it seems important that you are aware that your child is a separate entity that is going to disagree with you fundamentally for their entire adult lives on things that you agree with, and so it's important to recognize that they are an autonomous, free-thinking person.
Yeah.
Who deserves the facts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Deserve the facts.
Atheist Edge. Walking the edge of what some consider offensive. But your feelings don't matter here. Only facts. Edgy commentary on the dangers of doctrine, the foibles of faith, the bullshit of belief, the stupidity of superstition, and the idiocy of indoctrination. With razor-sharp wit, curiosity, and critical thought, we take an unblinking look at today's religions. We are Atheist Edge.